You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from the cinematropolis.com. And today's topic is Season 2, Episode 4, Avatar. Not to be mistaken for James Cameron's Avatar. Not to be mistaken for Avatar: The Last Airbender. There's a lot of avatars out there.
You actually bring up an interesting point that occurred to me while I was looking at the title card.
Go on.
So, this title card for me is just okay. It doesn't blow my mind per se, because we know we're going to get into some Egyptian stuff. So there's some Egyptian stuff that honestly makes it a little too busy. I pull out Egyptian, but I don't pull out one iconic image.
Josh, you hit it on exactly my note. This title card is visually busy AF.
Yeah.
I couldn't even, it's not clear what I'm actually supposed to be looking at because the hieroglyphics are so prominent, it takes away from the actual name that's
It's
on
actually
there.
difficult to read.
It is difficult to read.
The title itself.
Yeah, I actually think this is a borderline F title card because of that. The music's kind of cool, but the fact that I am having a hard time reading the title of the episode, not good title card.
Right. It's automatically discounted just on sort of technical issues. I can't read the damn thing. It's too complicated to look at.
Too busy.
I do like the music because it feels like it's taken right from the soundtrack of 1995's The Mummy.
Yes, it does.
So I like that a lot. But thinking about the word avatar. So I know, just again, I was this kind of kid, right? I read the Deities and Demigods, Dungeons and Dragons book too much and stuff. I knew that word then. But it was not a prominent word. Since then, we have had multiple. You've got video games where you talk about what your avatar is. We have Avatar: The Last Airbender coming in and telling us something a bit closer to the classical meaning of that word, like the more religious or philosophical meaning of that word. It's a much more ubiquitous word now, and it just made me go, this is a title card that, technical difficulties aside, would tell you more about the episode now, like the average viewer. The title itself would tell you more about the title, what's happening.
The title, not the title card.
The title itself would, in 2019, tell you more about this episode than it did back when it was first aired.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fascinating pop cultural evolution where this is a concept that now is a thing we talk about all the time and then was an obscure bit of occult language.
No, I think that's great. And that's one thing, Joshua, we've hit on in our most recent discussion about Trial when we talk about Mad Hatter as an incel. It's really interesting to see how the cultural language, because there has been, guys, there has been a cultural development since then, which is actually pretty cool. I mean,
quite a few. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about the idea of feminism in the 90s versus feminism today.
Yes.
We've talked about the incels thing, and now we're talking about the word avatar. Because you're right, I don't think I would have known what it meant when I first watched this show. I had no clue.
Saying, I'm the weird one out when I was like, oh, I didn't know what. I'm just saying, as a clue, as a thing, we talk about the title cards as, what does it tell me about the episode? Right? And this one tells us we're going to do Egyptian stuff. Okay, great. But that name is really important.
Correct.
And it would have been a mystery to the vast majority of adults in that time frame.
Correct.
But now, I'm expecting things.
I am expecting that someone else will embody someone else.
Right. And so I really liked that aspect, which is so completely divorced from the actual title card itself that it gets at no points.
I seriously I'm like D- or F. Maybe. The only thing...
the fact we can't read it, F.
Okay, yeah. So, Joshua, I have to make a confession. I feel like this is a fun episode, but I also feel like it does zero to add to any of the Ra's al Ghul stuff.
I really like it because it brings him back from the dead.
Really quickly, by the way. It was only a
Pretty
handful
fast.
of episodes ago that he, air quotes, died.
Right.
In the Demon's Quest a few talks ago.
So I like that it brings him back, and I feel like for that reason, it's kind of an important watch. I think that what I like most about it is what it does to the Bruce and Talia relationship, which was largely informed by a bunch of nothing in Demon's Quest.
Oh, it was terrible.
It was terrible.
We talked about it on that conversation. She was totally sidelined as being a prop for both Bruce and Ra's al Ghul.
Exactly.
She gets a little more here. She gets a little more development, a little more agency.
She was so important in her first appearance.
Correct.
And then back here, we get to have this moment between, or several moments between Bruce and Talia, really, where they discuss that, like, she's betrayed by the fact that Ra's is back.
And didn't tell her.
And Bruce actually is sorry he has to be the one that bears that news. And then they team up because clearly we have to deal with this. Well, and she sees the similarities between them. The Bruce-Talia relationship in this episode is a phenomenon and is the best thing going on in it. And that's what the episode's really about.
You know, that's fair. But
you could lose it.
I could. Well, here's my thing, and here's where my problem came in, because you're right. I actually agree with you, especially looking back at it. When I was watching it, though, I didn't believe her.
Interesting.
So
okay.
You know what I mean? She's like, well, I didn't know. I mean, I had no reason to disbelieve her. I had no reason to disbelieve her, but I just knowing like what I know about that complicated relationship with her dad, I'm like, well, she says she doesn't know, but is it part of a bigger trap?
I feel like by the end,
it's very by the end it's very clear.
Yeah,
but,
no, that's a good point.
But like the way you're talking about it initially, the whole time I was waiting for the rug to get pulled out from underneath me, and it never happened.
Oh yeah, and largely by having the rug pulled out from under Bruce, and it doesn't happen. Right? Yeah.
Correct.
Interesting read.
But the way you're putting it, though, I think that's an incredibly valid and read that actually makes me reconsider and I'll give the episode some more points for that, because you're right. And it is really great. It tells you a lot more about her relationship with Ra's al Ghul than I think any of the past episodes.
Yes, it's a relationship episode. Okay. Bruce to Talia, Talia to Ra's, Ra's to Bruce via Talia, as she sees the ways that they're similar and the ways that they're different. But I do not blame you for kind of missing that on the first viewing, because the episode really does everything it can to hide the fact that it's about those relationships. Mm-hmm. You have this worthless prologue.
Yeah, no, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I was like, cool. By the way, the thing I kept thinking of the whole time, Jurassic Park. It's the whole like, oh, we've got this thing we're digging up, but there was no talking. It was just music. For some reason, I got the Jurassic Park, the opening scene of Jurassic Park, the prologue of that movie, very similar. But yeah, no payoff whatsoever in any way.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, like, at all. As good as it is. Okay, here's a shocking thing. And if you've listened to me on any of my other podcasts, especially ones where I dive really deep into any given story, this will not be a surprising stance, but this is facts. Prologues are garbage. Don't do them. They are always an author unsure how to start their story, or an author expositing to you things that they couldn't figure out how to work into the regular meat of their story. Okay, I just said always, and now I'm going to own that it's not 100%. It is so close to 100%, I feel confident saying always, and then we can talk about the times when it's not.
I don't agree with that, but I think
You don't agree with that because you were thinking of one or two good ones.
Well, for example, and we were just having an off-air conversation about Game of Thrones. Martin incorporates prologues into basically all of his books. And the reason he does it is because that almost every, if not every, I actually might be every prologue. So do you know how the Game of Thrones books work? Each chapter is from a different character's point of view.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the prologues in those, for example, you're seeing a perspective you will never see again. A lot of times they die, or that character, you see them again from a different person's point of view, and then they die. So
I cannot speak to Game of Thrones specifically, but the way that you describe that is why I would declare it garbage. Like, make it part of the main story. Why is it a prologue? And with fantasy novels,
it's all about getting inside their head, though.
Okay, but every other chapter is also from somebody else's perspective.
Someone else's perspective. It's like a one-off. You get this character's perspective once.
All right.
But okay,
I don't buy it as a okay.
Sure.
So, as a concept, prologues are garbage.
Sure.
When they aren't, they are rare. And in fantasy novels specifically, I'm not going to speak to Game of Thrones because I have not read them, but in fantasy novels, they fall very hard into that. Here's a bunch of history that I, the author, think you need to know about the world. You don't really. Or if you really do, I should have worked it into the story as a whole. All that to say, this is like, if I were writing a paper on this prologue is the thesis. This is the wrap-up. And here, let me prove to you, with the most worthless yet beautifully executed prologue I have ever seen.
Sure.
It is simultaneously amazing to watch on its own merits and is needless for everything that comes after. Who is this guy?
Oh, yeah, the prologue here?
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's
awful.
So,
Yes, it looks. Yes, execution's great, but
I wanted it to matter because it's so good.
Well, the way the way it was executed reminded me of Jurassic Park, so it got points from me there because I thought, well, this is really well executed. And there's this kid they kept zooming in on his face, and I was like, oh man, this kid's gonna play a role somewhere in this episode. Nope.
Yeah. Now, if he had, it'd still be garbage. But at least there would be a reason for it to exist. They did Indiana Jones stuff in this prologue for what? It doesn't. Like with the hat and the whole, I don't get it.
What about the prologue to the Mummy, the 1999 Mummy? While we're talking about Ra's al Ghul,
garbage.
Okay,
beautiful garbage.
Okay, I haven't watched that movie in a while, so I'm not going to argue. But I know you like that movie, and I recall really liking that prologue. But
no, as its own piece, it's wonderful.
Sure,
as a piece of the whole, it's worthless. Everything that we discover in that, we discover in the regular film.
But okay, just a question.
And we figure it out along with our protagonists.
Sure.
When it matters.
Okay, so let me ask you, or another example. Within the DCAU, we see this prologues used all the time in Justice League, all the time. It's the cold open followed by the credits, and then you jump into the actual story. Happens frequently.
Give me an example. Because there are usually two ways that this is done. And one way is, let's say, the James Bond way. We always have kind of like a big dumb action sequence,
right.
Which is fun and makes a certain amount of sense for a film, right? Because we are then going to do a bunch of boring talking, and it's going to be a while before we do another big action sequence.
Yeah.
But we want everybody to remember that James Bond has big dumb action sequences.
Of course.
I don't love it, but I get the point of those.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So the other one is what I think is usually done on Justice League, where we see the crime. Right? We see the crime committed or we see the thing happening that the Justice League is going to deal with.
Right. That would be, yes, correct.
Not a prologue. That's part of the narrative.
Okay, so for the episode that's coming to mind immediately, because I remember always thinking like this is a weird disconnected thing, but I appreciate it now. But it's the episode where you go back to the medieval times and Etrigan the demon. You see like basically the origin story of the demon Etrigan, right?
Yeah, that's a garbage prologue. We don't need it.
I mean, I appreciate it because it gives me more context for the story we're about to tell.
But everything that you need to know from that prologue, we also get in the exposition of the actual.
But
show.
I would rather see this and then have him recap it rather than just have him recap it. It's a visual difference, right? Like it's seeing something happen versus him just telling me. He could just tell me and I would still buy it. But for me, I feel like I have more invested because I've seen the event happen in context.
This is why it's very difficult and why the discussion of prologues gets very thorny very quickly, is that very often the prologues are beautifully executed, like on their own merits as a separate piece, like this one.
Right.
It's great. But what do they do for the larger narrative? They're not necessary. And so at that point, when you're in a 22-minute show, I'm like, find something better to do with those 2 or 3 or 4 minutes that actually is part of the main narrative.
I concur, and I concur with you that this is a garbage prologue. I'm just saying that I think, in general, prologues are not always used effectively. A lot of times they are dumb and are garbage, but a lot of times for the viewer, the reader, game player, whatever you're doing, it helps you provide context for things that will happen later. Is it necessary? Not necessary. It's not necessary, but it does add value to the story.
Varsity level storytelling says you work that into your main narrative.
Well,
prologue is JV
Would you rather see flashbacks in the middle of your narrative, Joshua? Because I know you don't like those either.
No, we do this by making it actually impactful to the people involved in the story, which is also not a flashback.
What I'm saying is sometimes you need, when you can see things in context, it lifts up the character beats later. So it could be considered hacky writing. I see, because you would say,
and even not hacky, it's just lesser.
Sure,
it is not as strong as working that information into your ongoing narrative. Often they are beautifully executed. They're neat to watch on their own merits. I mean, that the flashback to Camelot and Etrigan getting cursed, and Jason getting cursed with Etrigan, great stuff. Not actually necessary. So that becomes the thing.
Not necessary, but I'm glad it's there because I appreciate the story that unfolds next more because I saw that.
Step it up and involve it in the actual.
But it would have to be a flashback then. If you were seeing this character, him be created, you're like, because it adds value when you see it versus having someone tell you about it.
You have Jason boy, this is the
conjure a spell that shows you.
No,
I mean, like,
you have a serious character beat for Jason Blood where he says, I made one mistake one time, and for that I am damned.
Yeah.
Gone the form of man. That's all I need to know.
That's all you need to know, but it helps. I would feel more emotionally impacted. I appreciate that I can get extra context through prologues a lot of the time. But I mean, hey, it's subjective. So, you know.
They are not varsity level storytelling. You work that stuff into your main narrative.
Okay. All right, we might.
They're not all terrible,
right?
But
right.
they are almost always useless.
Are they necessary? We're gonna have to agree to disagree. I will meet you halfway and say, are they necessary? No. Do I think they actually elevate stories a lot of the times? Yes. Personal opinion, but I'll meet you halfway.
We can meet on the fact that this one is terrible.
This one is terrible. This one is absolutely terrible because it doesn't tell us anything we don't. We learn everything we need to know in the episode. This does not add any terror or horror or weight to what we see. These characters never come back in the plot at all. I honestly don't know why it's here.
I legitimately don't understand it. Largely because most of the people that work on BTAS are varsity level storytellers.
Correct.
And this is just such. I hate to say it. I largely enjoy this episode a lot. I mean, but I think it's because I saw past the fog of all this other nonsense to realize it's a relationship episode.
Right.
But man, they just do everything they can to hide that fact. And it starts, as it should, with the prologue.
Well, and you wonder if it's maybe like a nod to like Indiana Jones stuff, because it feels like because they're definitely going hitting you hard to try to feel like a globe-trotting adventure like you'd see in a Bond film or an Indiana Jones film. So it feels like
we're gonna do that with Bruce and Talia,
right?
It's really
it's not necessary, but that's the only reason I can come up with. They would spend it's a solid 2.5 minutes of your time watching this prologue that has nothing
to do with anything, and in fact, it undermines something of the reveal at the end because. So we'll skip the middle and talk about the stuff that obfuscates the good bits, right? Which is this weird ghostly stuff at the end and this weird prologue. This prologue makes it clear that there is nothing good in that tomb.
Correct.
That only sinister ends will come to you for going into that tomb.
Right.
We're not supposed to believe that when Raish is going in there. We're supposed to believe that he is about to become more powerful.
Correct.
It's supposed to feel like it's danger. The prologue literally undermines that part of the plot, because when he goes in there, we're like, oh no, because we know nothing good will happen. It's really
kind of removes the mystery.
It absolutely ruins it. We're supposed to be on the edge of our seat about Raish next leveling himself.
Right.
When the prologue makes it clear that what's going to happen is he's going down.
He's going to discover something he doesn't want to find.
He doesn't want to find. There's some unseen horror, whereas he thinks it's unseen glory.
That's a good point. It really does undermine the mystery that could have been at play here, which I think actually would have helped the episode. It would have added a new element to the story, because you would have had the great relationship stuff with the globe-trotting stuff that's driven by a mystery or driven by a cool plot twist.
A mystery and a danger, right? Because the other thing that's kind of interesting, even as I like the relationship stuff, the part that's a little not great, is that Talia does not 100% buy into Raish's obsession.
No.
She also sees it as a lark or a thing he's always been obsessed with. So the urgency is more to find Raish than it is to stop Raish.
Correct.
Best practices would be both.
That's what Batman says. Or Bruce Wayne, which, by the way, Batman is disguised as Bruce Wayne for most of this episode. I thought that was funny.
Is kind of cool because we get to do all that Pith Helmet and Jodhpur stuff, which is, okay, I'm not going to go wildly down this rabbit trail, but it is worth saying that the Pith Helmet and Jodhpur stuff is some problematic Great White Hunter colonizing imagery.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That I didn't think a whit about in 1993. And I'm thinking about it now, and I really don't like it.
On that note,
it's not the point of this episode, so I want to be careful about running down that trail, but it is a thing that now really does red alerts for me.
Well, we talked about this in our conversation about the Demon's Quest, and it seems like it's going to be prevalent in most of these Ra's al Ghul episodes, that because they're dealing with people in the Middle East, there are other cultures, that you're going to see some problematic stuff come up, and it is very present here. I don't necessarily want to spend too much time talking about it, as we've already talked a lot about prologues, but when Ubu screams infidel, I'm like, oh! Yeah, it doesn't feel good. Does not feel good.
There's
not a good
ways to make that work because he is Middle Eastern and so is Raish, although only when we need him to be.
It's more
because,
ambiguous
again,
for Raish.
We're not going to go back and redo it, but that fact that this was an attempt to do a Yellow Peril villain in a different ethnicity that we would accept for O'Neill and Adams, 1980 something, 1970 something, and now we're just like, can we just not make whole ethnicities evil? Can we just not do that?
Right.
But when you take our Caucasian protagonist and our largely Caucasian presenting protagonist's sidekick in Talia and wrap them up in the clothes of colonization, I find it uncomfortable in a way that I definitely didn't when I watched it the first time.
Sure.
And I'd like to believe we would make different decisions now.
I think so.
That is admittedly a rabbit trail to this overall thing that kind of also has a moral of don't go steal other places' stuff because it might eat you.
Correct.
It's actually kind of a cautionary tale.
As we see in this, as this episode plays out, sometimes when you're colonizing, you get bit by the snake.
So I think going back to the relationship side of things, I think that we could have had our cake and eaten it too if we didn't have a prologue that was undermining the ending, and that if Talia had been, oh my God, he's finally found the tomb, like ratchet up the danger. So then you have the competing reasons for going after him. Talia's just looking for her dad and is hurt that he didn't tell her he was alive. And Bruce is like, I kind of need to stop this global threat.
Yeah.
And that would also set up Talia's betrayal of Bruce at the end much better. If we knew they were at odds from the beginning.
Right. Like her goals are not the same as his goals. They just happen to align in that moment.
Enough.
Yeah.
For us to go do this together, and we love each other and have this attraction, and so working together is not a chore, etc., etc. And then at the end, all this stuff happens.
Also,
that is a surprising
sad
twist.
Note tells a lot about the relationship and the kind of power Raish has over Talia. The fact that he actually left her to die, and she still forgave him.
Still chooses him.
Still chooses him. That's an abusive father-daughter relationship there.
Yeah, and I want Talia. I mean, I'm going to admit I'm also coming to Talia with a lot of years of character development from the comic books in my head.
Well, isn't that traditionally how it is in the comics too? At least in the early years.
In the beginning, yes. But now again, it's 2019. I would like to see more and better things from my female antagonists, and Talia specifically, who puts Raish in her shadow at her peak.
Right.
Just knowing we're not really going to get to that place because BTAS isn't interested in doing that exactly makes those portrayals worse for me.
I honestly think that this episode does better. We'll see. We're gonna have more Raish Al Ghul, Talia Al Ghul episodes to talk about. I just get the vibe that they didn't 100%. They still don't know 100% know what to do with her in this show.
I think you're absolutely right, because honestly, when they're on their globetrotting trip, Talia and Bruce, she should be his equal in every way.
Exactly.
She's not.
No, he's the one who saves her.
In our first appearance, she was.
She was great. Yeah, first appearance, she was great. Second
appearance,
rate,
she's furniture
terrible.
and it's awful.
It's terrible.
And this one, she's
kind of in the middle.
Attaché case.
Attaché case.
I mean,
yes.
she's along for the ride, and she has useful things to add to the mystery or whatever.
She's the utility belt.
Yeah. Wow, nailed it. But really, when they're in physical danger, she should be just as adept and just as dangerous as Bruce Wayne.
Oh, of course.
And she's not. She elbows the dude in the gut, and then Bruce comes and saves her. I don't like it. I don't like it.
Well, we'll see. I don't recall. I know that there are more episodes, so I'm interested to see where they go with Talia's overall development as a character.
Yeah, I don't remember the details. So this will be an interesting journey for us to go on and take our listeners with us as we see, do Raish and Talia land in a place that isn't really gross and terrible, or does it just kind of live there and stay? I'm just as interested to see.
We will see. A couple of fun notes I'm going to add here. Firstly, this is, again, just like we said with the Demon's Quest, embracing the Bond roots. They get locked in the glass case, and Bruce Wayne, who is not in his Batman costume, pulls out the vibrator noisemaker thing that shatters the glass. I think that felt like a Bond gadget.
I really liked that.
Oh, no, I did too. It just
except he had his Batman stuff in his backpack.
Correct.
Including the utility belt?
Yeah.
So why are we cobbling together a solution when he literally has acid pellets or whatever? Because I love it. I wish that his backpack had been knocked across the room or something, but he literally still has it on his back.
You see him like pull the bat stuff out immediately after
after that.
But they want him to look like James Bond.
I love that. I love him. I love him overcoming that with substandard tools. It's not just the tools that make the Batman, right? Like
Correct.
He'll sort it out. But it immediately undermines itself. Oh my God, that's like the subtitle for this episode. Avatar, we immediately undermine ourselves.
Consistently. Also, Batman doing tons of leg day, apparently. I know he works out, but geez, at the end when he knocked that giant statue down with his legs, I was like, whoa, this guy has been doing so many, what is he squatting right now, like 1,000 pounds?
Yeah.
Just fun stuff like that. I enjoyed it. I mean, overall, I think you've warmed me on the episode just a little bit. I don't know if I love it.
Oh, no, I don't love it because it gets in its own way too much.
It feels like an extension of the Demon's Quest. All my problems.
In all the worst ways.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because look, at the end, the big set piece at the end is amazing. And we have these weird, like, ghost zombie things that are all the victims.
Oh, yeah. We haven't even talked about that yet. Holy crap, guys. This is a kid's show. This would be terrifying.
It's pretty scary.
Zombie mummy woman comes out of the... firstly, she sucks the life out of Raish, and he looks like a dead man. And then
she seduces Raish.
Right.
Then reveals her true face. Sucks the life out of Raish, which gives her true face to him. And doesn't all that sound like themes that this episode might be about?
Yes.
It's
correct.
not.
It's not.
It's not about any of this.
Nope. And then she's got creepy slime monsters that are, like basically different. They're what's left over from the souls she's already consumed. That's eerie and dark and kind of scary. Woo. Can't believe this was targeted at the demographic of like 8 to 15-year-olds,
8 to 13-year-old boys. That's the golden space.
Ooh,
so.
I don't know, man.
As far as this episode just getting in its own way, that set piece is really good, and it has a lot of meaty things going on that could mean something in an episode where they bothered making them mean something.
Yeah,
it just doesn't happen here.
It just feels kind of lazy.
Yeah,
I thought, but it looked visually, it was cool. It was a very cool set piece.
Yeah,
and definitely not something I've seen on any other episode of Batman the Animated Series.
And a thing that it does again that Raish did for Batman the last time he showed up is he really levels up the world around Batman. Like we have not had occult, mystical things not really happen in BTAS up till now, and now all of a sudden Bruce Wayne has to realign his worldview that stuff actually exists. That's cool. I doubt that they capitalize on it much because it will be, not until after the redesign when Etrigan starts showing up and stuff like that.
That's where it really goes to the next level, I think.
But every time Raish shows up, Batman's world gets bigger. That's cool. I don't think they did it on purpose because this episode just hamstrings itself.
Yeah. Also, Batman, and this might be, I just find the image of Batman riding around in his Batman costume on a horse in the desert to be kind of hysterical and awesome.
I agree on both counts. I'm a little surprised that didn't make it into the Demon's Quest because that is definitely from that era of stories. Like the same hairy-chested love god Batman was also like Lawrence of Arabia Batmaning across the desert. Definitely, yeah.
Also, just fun nod. It's probably stuck out because the John Wick Chapter 3 trailer, or the John Wick 3 trailer just came out, and he's also walking around in his full suit with a machine gun over desert hills I don't know why. And it's a great image, and I'm like, they're kind of the same in my mind, kind of weird. And I'm going for it. I'm in for it. So Joshua, I think is there anything else you want to add about the episode?
No, well, let's talk about whether we consider this an essential watch.
No.
I want to say yes because it brings Raish back from the dead. I want to say yes.
Isn't it really anticlimactic how he comes back? He's just there. He's just there.
Okay, there's two ways that could go. Okay, one is very anticlimactic. The other one is coming back from the dead is what Ra's al Ghul does on a Tuesday afternoon.
Right.
No. They don't do that. But that's a thing you could do. Like, how did you come back? My mysteries are many, detective. I mean,
there are a lot of ways he could have
widening that world.
Could have pumped it up a little bit.
But that's not what they do. No. So it is a little anticlimactic, but it didn't have to be. And so that's why I say, like, I want to say that it's essential watching because Raish is a cool villain, and I want to say it's essential watching because it brings him back from the dead, and because we get a lot of nuance to Bruce and Talia's relationship. But it's also largely a terrible mess, and so I think no. Not essential.
No, not essential. If I was making a list, I certainly wouldn't include this in like a
bottom third.
Oh, at least it's down there. It's kind of like lower into the pack for the stuff we've talked about. I'd even say.
to me, that's just like a huge additional disappointment, because if I just kind of like bullet pointed the stuff that's in this episode, you would think top tier. And it's just
botched execution. Yeah. Well, Joshua, as always, we wrap up with some alternate media recommendations. So I'm very interested to see what you've got for us today.
Okay, so I've mentioned that I love Indiana Jones despite it being problematic. And I've mentioned that The Mummy holds a really like special place in my marriage, and also a thing that we watch all the time.
And now it's on Netflix, so you can watch it literally all the time.
Oh, I have one of the ancient DVDs where they're still claiming that an animated menu is a feature.
Guys, I watched the oh my God, there was a Mummy cartoon, and I definitely watched it.
There absolutely was, after the lackluster sequel. But just knowing that I love that stuff, but taking what I love most about this episode, the part that's least a mess, is that Bruce and Talia relationship, and that they are at odds with one another as they are on this globetrotting adventure. I submit to you, Romancing the Stone.
Romancing the Stone. So that's it's basically Indiana Jones, but the rom-com version.
Exactly.
And more cartoony, but in a really good, fun way.
Right. It's really over the top and fun, like some of the funnier parts of Indiana Jones are. Like, it just kind of goes, Indiana Jones probably runs that 70% serious, 30% slapstick. This will flip those.
This is what starring Michael Douglas, right? And
Kathleen Turner. Yes.
Kathleen Turner, yes. Okay, yeah.
Who are a phenomenal pair.
Oh, yeah.
And do not get along through most of this romantic comedy.
No. Joshua, that was actually on my list. It's just so much fun.
It really is so much fun. And this is a conversation that I have had repeatedly with my co-host on Listen Up A-Holes, the MCU podcast, Alani Diane Rich, who is a New York Times best-selling rom-com writer, basically. That she and I have had this conversation where we would love to see more action rom-coms or action romances, for that matter. Like, we don't get those. And I mean, we haven't had a rom-com superhero movie. That's a crime.
Wait, my evil ex-girlfriend wasn't, or not my evil ex-girlfriend, the one with Uma Thurman?
We haven't had a good superhero rom-com movie.
Fair enough.
And so the fact that we have to go back to the mid-'80s, I could be wrong. Listeners, if I'm wrong, if there's been a really good like action rom-com,
I like Night and Day.
Let me know. Oh, I don't know that I've seen that one.
That's kind of the exception to the rule, though. There's not that many I know of.
But Romancing the Stone's it is really next level stuff. Like,
yeah.
it is such a fun watch, and the chemistry between our leads is so good. And there's some actual Indiana Jones style daring do. Highly recommended if you haven't seen it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a perfect recommendation. Like I said, it's also my list. And by extension, I'm just going to throw an additional recommendation piggybacking off of Romancing the Stone, which is the Uncharted video game series, which were heavily inspired by Romancing the Stone.
Are those romance games?
There's a romance in it. It's especially
like
the first
important?
one. Like, it's important, yeah.
Okay, now I want to play Uncharted, and I super didn't care before.
Yeah, it's not like, I don't know if I would quite say it's quite as essential as Romancing the Stone, but the part of the game that sticks out, I mean, firstly, the gameplay is phenomenal.
Right.
The level of polish is great, but the thing I think from a storytelling perspective that makes it stand out is you are just generally very invested in all of the relationships. The romantic ones, but there's a family is a big theme in the later, especially like in the third and fourth one. It's like it starts as romance, but it grows to something else. The second one, there's a love triangle. Like the relationships play a pretty big role, and the characters are you just love all of them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the big part of what separates that from like maybe like an Indiana Jones. Because a lot of times people call Uncharted the Indiana Jones video game. I think that's partially true, but I really think it owes more of its roots to Romancing the Stone.
That's because not enough people are still talking about Romancing the Stone.
Exactly.
You and I have a new mission to make sure that changes.
Everyone watches Romancing the Stone. I have one other recommendation. This one's a little more of a stretch, but I think it still kind of fits the idea of the globe-trotting adventure where you go and search for like a very cool thing, and then when you get there, you find out it's not all what it's chalked up to be, and in fact you find an evil bad guy in the tomb. And that is Pixar's 2010 11 9 somewhere in the early late 2000s Up. Yes, when it's not making grown people cry in the first 10 minutes, it's actually like a very kind of like globe-trotting adventure. They're floating their house going to this magical land where they're gonna find the answer to their problems. I don't know. They're going to the adventure land where his wife always wanted to go because it was like on his bucket list. And when they get there, he finds, haha, my hero. Exactly what I wanted. I always wanted to meet my childhood hero. Oh, wait, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
He's a terrible person.
Don't meet your heroes.
That's real.
wraps up this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, Joshua, you can always find me on Twitter talking about film, television, video games, and all sorts of other pop culture goodness at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. I'm also the editor-in-chief and film critic at the Cinematropolis, and we publish these in-depth essays on all types of different films, oftentimes including science fiction and superhero films, all the stuff you'd want to read about. And you can find all these articles at thecinematropolis.com. Joshua, what about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough at Joshua Unruh. And remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. Join us for our next animated discussion when we look at a Green New Deal for horror in Season 2, Episode 5, House and Garden. We'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.